Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another awesome episode of You, Me, and ICED. I'm Dedra Stevenson, your hostess today, and I'm joined by two fantastic co-hosts. First of all, our illustrious Mr. B, who is back in business, back with us again. Hello, welcome.
Thank
So
you.
you've
Thank
been
you.
away on business,
I'm still away on
and
business.
oh no,
I'm in the
yes, and he's
Philippines.
still. Oh, now that's commitment. He's in the Philippines right now, but he's still managing to make time to be on our podcast, and we're very excited for that. Thank you. And Mr. B is the author of The Art of Giving Back, which is a great book. It's very inspiring. I highly recommend you go pick that up. And Richard Dee, who is a sci-fi author with how many titles now? 19?
18.
18,
Yeah,
probably a
and
19th in the works right now, though, right?
oh, there are several in the works. Yeah. So
I,
yeah, 19 will be along soon.
you and I are such kindred spirits that way. We can't possibly have just one thing in the
Wow.
works, which is just several titles are coming along all at one time,
Oh
right?
yeah, just when you think you're getting somewhere in one title, then another idea pops into your head, and you leave that and just set off in a completely different direction.
I totally know what that feels like. Actually, I really do. I mean, our brains are all over the place, honestly. It's a maze to keep up with it. It really is.
Oh yeah.
But today we're talking about something that is a little diversion, from our usual genres, the horror genre, the scare. So what do we think about that? I mean, horrors are people go to horror movies more than any other kind of genre. I have to put that out there first. And horror books, I think, sell more than any other genre as well. That is surprising, is it not? I mean, that people actually like being scared. People get a kick out of being afraid. And it makes you wonder why. What's that all about? What is this craving we have for being terrified, but then feeling that relief, knowing that it's not real, it didn't really happen, it's just a book, or it's just a story, or it's just an imagination, or it's just a movie. What do you think, Mr. B?
That one is hard because we keep going back for more, even if we felt like we didn't like it. Why do you go back for more? It's an interesting part of it when you get scared. I'm scared at a movie, but I think, I don't know, just my imagination. I think people want to feel alive. Why we use the phrase, well, let's just pinch ourselves to make sure this is real. So good, bad, or indifferent, we want to feel things, and a fear is a feeling very similar to joy. It's it stimulates our I don't know if it's called a cochlea or something like that. It stimulates our mind to have feelings, with feelings of
Right.
emotion, feelings of passion, feelings of fear. It tingles our spine, it tingles our soul, makes us feel alive. So maybe that's why we go back for more, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's very true. I mean, I've read a little bit, before this episode about the scientific aspects of it, and we do get a certain dose of serotonin, a little bit of dopamine as well. I mean, whenever you get that scare, but then you realize that everything is fine. You're actually safe. It's just a story. It's not real.
Right?
And it can be addictive,
Oh
actually,
yeah,
to
very
keep
much.
going back again and again for that.
Mm.
What do you think, Richard? Do you have a favorite horror story?
Yeah, well, I started reading horror stories years and years ago with James Herbert, with The Fog and the Rats and Shrine and stories like that. Um,
Wow.
my favorite horror movie, it's maybe not really a horror movie as much, but was the second Alien film, which
Ah,
was the action film, if you like. And there were so
yeah.
many times in that where you had to jump, you know. And I
The
can
jump
watch it.
scares.
I've got it on DVD. I've actually copied the DVD onto my computer, and I can sit and watch it, and it still has the same effect on me every time, even though I know it's a story,
You know it's
and I've seen
coming,
it,
but you
and I've
still
seen it
watch.
100 times before. It doesn't matter because I can just watch it, and I can be scared every single time, and it is addictive. I think you can get addicted to waiting for it, and there's almost a relief when it's over. So yeah,
That's
I can
right.
totally see the whole chemical balance thing and how it affects your mind.
It's somewhat like going to a roller coaster, isn't it? I mean, you know, the same loops and the
Yeah,
flips are going to
yeah,
be there
yeah,
at a roller
yeah.
coaster, but you have a tendency to want to go back and feel that adrenaline, happen again and again, right? That's why they call people who enjoy it adrenaline junkies, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. When
probably like that with horror.
Yeah, when I was working as a ship's pilot, I used to go out on a small boat into the estuary in all sorts of weathers, and we used to bounce around when it was rough, and it could get quite exciting, but it never really frightened me, I guess, not in the same way that going on a roller coaster and doing exactly the same thing that I was doing at work would give you a jolt, whereas when you did it at work, it just felt it's part of the job, you know. So
You know,
it's really strange how the two things sort of make your mind see
And
it
that's
differently.
so different because,
Yeah.
at work, it was probably like you could have faced a real danger,
Oh,
but
sure.
a
Yeah.
roller
Oh, yeah.
coaster is like an assimilated danger. So it's not
Yeah.
real,
Yeah.
So it's
And yet your
curious.
mind sees it totally different. No, I can't explain it, but I remember sitting in the in the pilot boat one night. It was pitch black, and we were bouncing and rolling all over the place. And I'm thinking, I paid to do this last week, and I was frightened. But now it's just, oh, come on, aren't we there yet? So, and it's just really weird. Yeah, it's just really strange.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What do you, Mr. B, what sort of, scary experiences have you gone back for more for?
Probably turbulence in an airplane.
Oh,
You
no.
know,
Yeah.
you
You've
know,
been traveling lately, so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
very, very valid.
Well, this podcast is about novels, writing, fear factors, scary movies, and so we have no shortage of that. But when we think about fear and what it does to our body, like I was mentioning earlier, we get something out of it, and that's why we become junkies to it because of how it makes us feel. And there's only so many things that your
Right.
extrasensory perception is agitated or activated. When you get goosebumps all over your arms, maybe that gives you an awareness of fear, but it probably also makes you feel good. Or when the what thing is that, dopamine or whatever the brain releases, or
Dopamine.
dopamine. I have no
Yes.
idea what those things are, but the body releases it and reacts to it. And we may feel it or feel as if it's fear, but we might just like it. The
Right.
awareness that something creepy is happening or about to happen, when the back of your hair stand up, and we all know where those signals are. You know, the the
Yeah.
the concern we have why we go back for it is if it's involuntarily comes at you, then we may not like it. But when we voluntarily go watch the movie, we were asking for it. It's just when we dream about it afterwards and scared the daylights out of us in the dream, that's when we were like jumping out of our bed wondering what did I just see or what just happened. And so there's a difference between voluntary and involuntary. And when it comes to movies and shows
True.
and so on, the book we read or the
Right.
movie we watch, we're voluntarily going after it.
Right. True. Now, there's also their question, with horror stories and all. Can horror actually reflect a cultural problem that's happening? I mean, what do you think about? I mean, can we think of examples of, horror stories that have come out that have reflected something that the author or the writer wanted to draw attention to?
I think you can use fiction to highlight any sort of problem. I mean, there was a film a few years ago called 28 Days Later, which
Ah,
He's dwelt
Yes.
on the idea of a global epidemic of a disease that wiped just about everyone out, or even if you go back a bit further, the Day of the Triffids or something like that. And that certainly reflected on the Cold War sort of aspect of imminent possible destruction. So yeah, anything post-apocalyptic can prey on fears of what's actually happening in the present day.
Or the fear of, maybe we're not alone in the universe. Perhaps
There's
there
another one.
are,
Yeah.
intelligent species, on other planets. I mean, there's plenty of science fiction horror out there. You know a lot about
Oh yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, we would like to think, that they're coming to make contact with us for a friendly purpose, but there's always a question. As humans, we can't help it. I don't think we can help it, wondering what that would actually be like, and would they be hostile? There's a part of us that's very afraid. And I think by reading stories about it, or either watching them play out, in a film or something, it's giving us a chance to think about it in sort of a safe framework, a safe environment. So because you can tell yourself, oh, it's not real, this is just a story, it's just but what do you think? Do you have other thoughts on that?
So if you're asking me, then we know we just experienced a global pandemic, whether we have pandemic deniers or not. Having over 1 million people die in the United States, and the numbers now down to about 400 or below 400 a day, is still a death rate or other rates with something that's physically happening. So when we read a book
Right.
or watch a movie about something like this, we feel now that nothing is really so far-fetched. I mean, it's really, really weird. Before we had the Night of the Walking Dead, and then we got into all kinds of movies that I was like, oh no, I'm turning it off as another zombie movie. But the pandemic, we lived in our, yeah, because you just get so many zombie movies. But the pandemic felt
What
so
was that with
zombie.
zombies lately? It's like a lot of zombie stories, right?
Yeah, but the pandemic time felt very zombie-ish. At the time when it
It
started, I was
did.
living in Burj Khalifa, and I wasn't sure if we were going to run out of food because we keep ordering and getting it. So I told my wife, I'm going downstairs to the main grocery store in the Dubai Mall to see if there's actually food there. So we've seen movies and so on, and we always refer to our movies in our script. And so, yes, the
Right.
mall was zombie-like empty, and it's scary empty. You get this feeling of fear that no one is there. I did make it to the grocery
Right.
store, and it was completely full of food. I got some relief. But imagine walking through the Dubai Mall with no one there. And that I
Yes.
did, and it was like a reflection of a movie. So the question you were bringing up, does life reflect the movies, or do the movies reflect life? And so it makes it
Exactly.
quite interesting if we find an
Well, it's
answer to
just like
that.
any art form, I mean, right, books and films, they do sort of reflect the culture of the time, problems that are happening at this time, and they sort of mirror, whatever the author is, had on their mind. I mean, have you ever written a character that is, a villainous character that actually says something that you actually would like to say, but you can't say as yourself? What about you,
Uh,
Rich? Do you have a
not
villain that you've willingly spoken through?
it's funny because I don't consciously set out to sort of tell a moral tale or a fable or something like that. But when I read the reviews, some of the reviews I get, people pick up on things that they see in the story that I really
Yes,
didn't think I was writing, and yet. When you look back at what they've said and you look at it and you think, well, actually, yeah, they're right. I was making that commentary, or I was, putting that point across, and I was almost doing it. Well, I was doing it without realizing I was doing it. So I think the reason for that is it's almost an osmosis from the times we live in it just automatically comes through, which is why you read an old book now that was written say 50, 60, 100 years ago, and it seems old fashioned
right.
because the times are different, you know.
True.
So it's a reflection of those times, but it's not a familiar time because you're not in those times during these times, if you see what I
Mhm.
mean.
Right. Well, it goes back to fairy tales too.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
when we listen to, the grandparents, their parents, reading fairy tales to us, and those fairy tales didn't start out as sweet. They
Oh
started
no,
out really
that's right.
horrific, actually, like
Yeah,
the
Hansel
horror
and
tales.
Gretel was scary
Yeah,
as ever.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
scary, actually, Hansel and Gretel, and it does tell a story that, the moral of the story is don't wander away from your parents, and
Mm.
go off alone into the woods, or otherwise there could be, predators out there like the witch, and they could lead you in there with candy. I mean, that's actually very, applicable today, is it not? I mean, anybody who's got kids, you
Mm.
worry about some weird stranger, with candy leading your children away, right? It's like the witch did with
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel. So, there's a great example,
Yeah,
actually.
and
That
as we speak about it, I was remembering the movie "The Sum of All Fears" was the title of the
good one.
movie, and then I thought, there's a lot of scripts, writings, and movies with the word fear in it, and it's meaning that it's a popular emotion to trigger in writing and
Right.
in movies and manuscripts and script. Even
Hmm.
even if you did a Broadway play, the Phantom of the Opera was supposed to be scary, even if he knows how to
Hmm.
sing, a scary good singer. But the whole idea, yes, it's an art, and it brings up our senses so we can be in the audience at the edge of our seats, or the stimulation of our fear mongering emotions. That it's part of what makes us alive, I think. So
Yeah.
Right.
And it,
Right.
it transcends genre as well, doesn't it? Because people can
It
say, well, I don't like
does.
sci-fi or I don't like whatever, but they will always like to be scared.
right.
It's true,
Yeah.
true. I think that it's very true that it transcends genres, and yeah, yeah. I mean, well, there's science, like we said, there's science fiction horror, and I mean, I think that there's even horror itself has so many subgenres, to think about. I mean, I don't enjoy, a blood and guts festival, but a lot of other people do. I mean, they like, brains exploding and hearts being slashed and stuff like that, but not, I pretty much Richard's laughing at me now. But I prefer a much more psychological, supernatural kind of twist, like that's probably why I, chose that, for the Hakima's tale and for, Spook's tale, which is behind me there, in my background, Ifrit, you know, um, and yeah, I think I probably have, said things through my villains, that are probably dark thoughts of my own, like the blue the blue Jenny in Hakima's tale, is very angry at humanity for destroying the earth and destroying, themselves and becoming selfish, greedy creatures, that no longer deserve the planet. And I have to say there is something that something to agree with there, I think, but others disagree. But, look what we've done to the environment, though, truthfully, I mean, would it be all that far-fetched for an alien life form, for example, to think that about us? You
And
know?
it's very possible, and also in the fear category, we have things we can um, that has been written, and even me myself in my book, I wrote things about my fear of being alone, or my fear of not leaving a mark, or my fear of being abandoned, and all the different kind of human social fears that comes with us.
Mhm.
And so when we look at it, even from that perspective alone, it's not necessarily a horror, but it's a fearful, and it can be very, very disconcerting to have a fear of not leaving a mark, or not
That's
being a
true.
contributor to society. And the worst ones I always thought was just really just being alone.
That is a
you
big
know?
one, actually, and that's a fear that a lot of people share, being alone.
Right.
And there's an awful lot of things that people will do, to ensure that they're not alone. I mean, maybe even things that are way outside their comfort zone, to be sure that they won't be alone, right? I mean, that could be the basis of, horror stories on its own, right? Am I right? I mean, we could build off of even that.
Yes, and as you brought it up earlier, it's one of those things that does reflect life. Because imagine getting to I'm 61 and getting to somewhere close to 91 and realizing that no family members showed up, or like there's a hurricane going towards Florida and the Panhandle. Everyone is being told to evacuate, and either you didn't get the message or you can't move because you're alone in an apartment or a small studio as an older person. So fear comes, and I'm glad it's brought up. The movie will reflect all
Yes.
of these fear. The book will reflect all of these fears, and so it could be very disconcerting to feel that this can be real after you have read it.
Exactly. Exactly. That's true. That's
Oh,
Yeah.
very
very true.
true. I
Yeah, yeah.
mean, I think sometimes horror stories can actually help us face our fears, like fears of, closed in spaces, or fears of, certain creatures, I mean, there's probably a story to match out there someplace that if you, like I said earlier, I mean, you can experience it in kind of a safe zone, because you can tell yourself it's just a book, or it's just a story, or or a campfire stories. What about those?
Oh, yeah.
We didn't even really mention, like, have either of you been to, like, campsites, where they told scary stories around the fire? I have. I mean, I'm
Or
Long
American. We
time
do
ago.
right.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And as we're doing the comparison, Richard, is like you would write it and someone might be living it, right? Whether you put your fictional characters or not, people literally live these things, or being trapped in a car between two trees and can't get out, or snowballs falling
Oh,
down
yeah.
the
Yeah.
hill, or being submerged in water and wondering how do you escape from that car. And we've seen these things on our TV, in the news. And so it's a very, very good and valid point about what's written and made
Yeah.
into a movie or show, and what happens in real life, and both fear factors are just upon us,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
Yeah.
so sometimes we
Yeah.
get it voluntarily, sometimes we get it involuntarily.
Uh,
True
it,
that.
yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
one thing I wanted to ask
yeah.
you guys though, why is the book always scarier than the film?
I,
What do you think?
Richard.
I think it's because you can use your imagination to make it as scary as you want subconsciously.
True.
Uh-huh.
When you're watching a movie, yes, someone can leap at you from the side of the screen, or something awful can suddenly happen. When you're reading it, you've got time to build up to it, and your mind has no limit into how much it can prey on you to make it scary. I mean, a filmmaker like Alfred Hitchcock was a master of doing that. He didn't show you much in the film, but he left it to your imagination to make it as
Yeah.
bad as you wanted, really.
Oh,
And I think the book
true.
does the same, because if you don't get it the first time, you can always nip back and read it again. Whereas in a movie, it's gone. You've had the scare, the monster's jumped out of the cupboard, and that's it. It's gone. But when you've got the books in your hand, you can look at it and you can take it nice and slow, and you can build it up in your mind, especially if you're reading in a dark room with just a single light, and suddenly it can all come in on you.
Yeah, that's so true. I agree with everything you just said, actually. I think, that's probably why the younger you actually read a book too, the more you actually have that effect. I mean,
Mm,
when I read the Amityville Horror, at 12, that scared the living hell out of me, I mean, of course, the film was equally terrifying. It was really scary, especially the fact that it was based on a true story. I mean, that was wild. It's so freaky, but
And
the book, to me, was way more terrifying because, like you said, I had had time to build that up in my head, what those scenes looked like, and it's probably way worse than it actually was.
and just following up to what Richard said, that you can line up 10 people on a couch and each of them could read that same exact script, and you get 10 different interpretations of the fear factors in there, and how it approach
Yeah.
and when it actually suddenly hits them with fear at different points if we were to do a scientific measurement. And so the written word can be interpreted so many different ways. The movie is interpreted by the director to the point exactly when he's going to sneak up on you and scare you. And so again,
Mhm.
all very interesting.
Yeah.
So, as we come to the close of this podcast, it makes me it makes me nervous about in the shower. They always talk about the psycho.
The psycho in the shower.
I
Yeah, the
heard someone
shower
told me
scene is
recently they don't.
classic.
Yeah, they told me that we do not close the shower door. We do not draw the shower curtain. I was like, really? And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah. Oh, I don't shampoo my hair with my eyes
Brilliant.
closed. Okay.
Brilliant. Well, it's just getting us all in the mood for Halloween, because we've got Halloween this month, one of my favorite holidays. So, let's just keep that in mind. It's all in good fun. It's not really real. It's just a story. And with that, I guess we can close out our episode of Jump Scare for this podcast. And we'll see you guys back next week.
Brilliant.
I'll try
Lovely
my
talking
best.
to you, as usual.
I'll try my best to
Yeah.
be in the right place at the right time.
Oh, please do. It's so much more fun when you're here.
Well, I miss it too. But sometimes we have to do our bread and butter.
That's true. We all have our days that we can't be here, and we understand that. And we do miss Rodney today, by the way.
So we'll pray for him
big shout out to
hope
Rodney.
him and his
Sending all
family.
best wishes. Hope everything's, good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Amen.